in question and wrestle with that, and that's good. So I hope that you are forming not only your own new ideas and expressions and your articulations, but you're also going to take full advantage of being able to be in conversation and question, or allow for yourself to be questioned as we go across the rest of this day. We are going to now have Reverend Dr. Steve Lawlyer speak those things that are as they are completed. But Steve Lawlyer is director of St. Stephen's Episcopal Church. That is our sister church here in Ferguson. And I hope Steve doesn't mind, but when I first arrived here in Ferguson about 6.5 years ago, one of the things I did, I asked people, I said, now who and what church is doing something in the community? Who's that place where people, they need something, or who's the kind of the resident pastor for the people? And to a person, they all said, you need to meet Steve Lawlyer, and you need to go to St. Stephen's. That's the place that they have the winter edition or session of the farmers market is housed in their church. That was the place where you go if you needed food, and they have food pantry. Go to St. Stephen's. It was the place that was providing space for young people, whether they were homeschooled or otherwise, to be tutored or to be mentored in instrumental music. St. Stephen's was the place, and Steve Lawlyer was the name. And I got to meet him, and very quickly I said, well, let me run with you. And because I need some street cred, because, you know, I'm black in Ferguson and new. And that's how it works here. This is a prideful place, and people they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And when the people that they trust you, then you're all good. And so Steve was one of those guys. Steve is a very accomplished professional, as well as a practitioner of the faith, but also he brings with him years of experience with developing and consulting to major companies about startup, venture capital, all that good stuff. But most of all, he is just a cool A guy. He's a friend, and more importantly, he's been a man of faith that has helped to do a great deal of work, lead a great deal of work, and cause a great deal of healing to take place in this community. So I want to invite, in his own way, my brother, my friend, Reverend Steve Lawlyer, to this podium.
Thank you. So running with Willis would mean right now that I was preparing for a triathlon, which is no way true, right? That's like my superhero power fantasy, if I could do that. So I'm going to put this coffee down so I don't spill it, and say, first of all, I'm really grateful to be with you and have this time. My conversation with you, or what I hope to bring to this conversation, is connected very much, Dr. Lightsey, to one thing you said, which is that money in communities stays in communities, and it works for the benefit of communities. And so my one-note song today is about what we've learned in the last 3 years, and especially about the money side. I want to say a couple of things to locate myself in this conversation. One of those is that I was trained and formed very much in a tradition of being a local parish priest. So my focus is kind of hyper-local. Some of the people have much richer and better understandings and powerful understandings of things. My experience is, as some people would say, very micro and local. But I'm going to talk about the macro. A new word for me is the meso, which is in the middle, but sometimes maybe it'd be the mesisto, and then the micro. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about this question of, does money spent in the community or for the community or on the community benefit the community? And I used as a title of this Sister, Can You Spare Me a GoFundMe account, as a play with an old song that was called Brother, Can You Spare Me a Dime? And that narrative in that song was a narrative about a man who's trying to find some money And his questions are questions about people who served in the war, the First World War, people who were conscripted and enslaved, people who worked in the fields and the factories, being on the soup line and not having anything. And so the question that he's asking in this song is not only, can you spare me a dime, I need the money, but how is it that those of us who make communities what they are increasingly do not gain the benefit of what's happening in that community? The extraction of wealth is the way that that gets talked about sometimes. And I want to look at it through a particular lens. So if we could go to the next slide. A lot of money came into the Ferguson community in the area after Michael Brown was killed. So I'm looking at it through the lens of money available to do the good work in this community, the restorative justice work, the anti-racist work, the kind of intersectional work that moved away from people being invisible and women being made invisible, because Ferguson, in the general area, most of the businesses are owned by women, and there are small 3 to 1 person businesses. All right, so we have some big shops around, but that's not our primary thing. So just to look at this slide, in an article in the St. Louis Business Journal 2 Fridays ago, there's a story about what's happened in Ferguson since Michael Brown was killed. And in that story, they identified in various tranches $65 million that they said had been spent on this general community. 65 million. And that money showed up in everything from the, believe it or not, the Corps of Engineers and the, spending money to tear down businesses that were on West Forest, are there no longer. That money came in programs for various kinds of things. We received some of that money at St. Stephen's for food collection, distribution. But I want to highlight a particular form of that. So 65 million, 10 days ago, a $3 million building was opened on West Florissant that is co-location for the Urban League and the Salvation Army. Okay, so this is what I would call a kind of macro level of funding. If you look at the list of the funders beyond the Urban League and the Salvation Army, it is a set of St. Louis corporations and foundations. Okay? So that money came from big donors. Okay, and that's a macro picture. All right. That center, as I understand it, is going to be dedicated to things like job preparedness and to other kinds of training. It's going to be a location for people to use space. And so the questions that come out of that for me are questions about local hiring. So if it's staffed, where do the people who staff that place, where do they live? If you're getting people involved in programs, and programs cost, and you're spending money on those costs, curriculum, technology, whatever, are the vendors for those things local? Where in the end does the money end up, right? So that's a macro level of a kind of funding that showed up. The next level, this meso level, is the one that I used for the title. So GoFundMe became a tool in the time after Michael Brown was killed for fundraising. And the amount of money that was raised was everything from what's the number here? $72,000 for cake business, down to $800 for somebody who was trying to restore their store. So in all told, you had $464,000 raised through GoFundMe. Okay. Here's the outcome, near as I could tell. I went through the list, and of that, you have $303,614 went to businesses or organizations that are struggling. They're open or kind of open. They're diminished versions of their former self, but they're still, the doors are open. Okay. I was talking to Pastor Johnson about this and a couple of those, and one in particular that received a significant amount of money will most likely be closed by the time we all get to December, I think. So $464,000, $303,000 struggling. $60,000 roughly, the businesses moved. They left Ferguson. They moved, in some instances, close enough, in some instances farther. So that money funded moving the businesses out of Ferguson. Okay. $21,000 of that, those businesses are closed. So it's roughly 5% of those businesses are closed. So I say all of this because, again, with this kind of fine focus on, where does the money come from? What's the money do? Does it benefit the community? In general terms, the GoFundMe money benefited the community, but it's a very tenuous kind of situation for the businesses that benefited the most. One of those, can I see the next slide, or can we see the next slide, please? We are. One of those you've heard about. So emerging after the time of Michael Brown's killing was Hands Up United. Hands Up United activated a lot of people around various kinds of responses during the time of organizing, and became one of those vehicles for helping people who were activated to have technical tools to communicate, to do their work. So one of their programs, and they asked for $10,000 during the GoFundMe. They raised 11. One of the programs that they fund is Coding Camp. So they are available, they run classes, and the outcome of the class, $500 essentially cost, is that the person who goes through the class ends up with a Google Chrome book, right? And they know how to code. So these graduates, if you will, these young women and men who have been part of this program are building websites, developing social media strategies, doing things in the community for community organizations that are low or no cost and have significant impact. So on the micro level, there is great impact for those $500 individual amounts. Hard to buy the Chromebooks locally. That was a big conversation they had. They've used facilities not just in this community because of the need for multiple computers at one place for training, but they're working on that. They've developed an additional program that is called Breakfast and Books. And so they have locations where people come, children come, and they get books, there's storytelling, and that literature is rich with the kind of literature that mainstream schooling doesn't include. So they're very powerful about their choice of what they put in the hands of young readers, okay? So suffice to say, I would put the gold star or the blue ribbon on their work. That's money in the community that's making a profound impact. Let me close with one story in the last, second to last slide. I have tried several times in the last month to reach out to a young man. This picture reminded me of him and conversations I've had with him. The last time I talked with him, it was a sad conversation. He was activated in the time after Michael Brown was killed. He was out there doing incredible work. He described himself as someone who was a justice warrior and wanted to work on future innovation and ways to respond. And he had all kinds of wisdom about the ways that the funding can domesticate and neutralize action. And so he was able to go through the coding camp, maybe to get him some additional funding. He did some website work and some workshop. And like many people who were part of the on-the-ground action, he hit a wall. The time of fatigue and the time of sorrow and the time of frustration. And So I tell you his story. I don't put his name in there. I didn't get his permission to tell you his story in detail. But I tell you this because, to me, when the invitation came to be a part of this gathering, it was bring a provocative question. And I guess the thing that is most, and I found myself tearfully saying this yesterday, I didn't realize what all was there, that breaks my heart, is that at that micro personal level, we have many people who responded, many people who felt the power, and I would say the power of the spirit and justice to come forward, to step into the breach, to risk tear gas, to risk rubber bullets, to risk incarceration. And money is a problem. So what I hope in our conversations is that those of you who have experienced ways to help people not only support their spiritual life and their powerful connection to one another and their action, but to resource them in this very mundane but significant way with the money, then I'll be able to hear from you what you've seen that has worked, because we, as you know, have a lot of work yet to do. So my concluding question is not really, sister, can you spare me a GoFundMe account, but it really is, how can we have it so that money spent in and for communities benefits those communities and stays in a generative way in the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. If you have any questions about anything that Reverend Lawlyer covered in his talk, you want to talk about funding movements, this next little 5-minute break is a great opportunity to do that. But I also have an assignment for you during this next break, because you can't take the elementary school teacher out of someone. So my assignment for this break is for you to introduce yourself to 2 people in this room that you do not already know. So I want you to learn their names, why they're here today, and then what kind of justice work are they involved in, or what are they thinking about right now, that kind of thing. So meet someone, ask them their name, why they're here, and what their relationship to justice work is. We're going to be back in 5 minutes with Heidi Kim. Thank you.
Okay, so your name.